This one comes from Steve from Indianapolis.
Okay.
I read Tactics and am wondering how to navigate conversations in which you're asked a question, but then feel stuck after hearing the answer and don't feel safe. How do you gracefully move from this position? Do you have any examples you could share?
Well, actually, I need an example from Steve to be clear on what he has in mind. In other words, he asks the question, he gets an answer, and he doesn't know what to do, where to go next, and in fact feels vulnerable in light of the answer that's given, or vulnerable because he started a conversation that he can't pursue.
That's what it sounds like to me. He doesn't have a response.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, I kind of start with simple to more complex. You could simply say, thank you. Okay, that clears it up for me. I was just curious about that, you know. And incidentally, there's nothing at all wrong with that. And I encourage, in a sense, newbies who are just starting out, gave a talk on this last weekend in Anchorage, Alaska. And my point to them was, look, you know very little here, but you know enough to just test it out. But you're ankle deep in the shallow end of the pool. It's easy. You just ask these questions and consider yourself a student of the other person's view. Don't think about what's happening down the line. In fact, I make a big point about this. In your very first step of the game plan, you're going to just think about gathering information. You're not going to think about where you're going to go next. And maybe this is the way Steve has been doing. He said, okay, I'm going to ask this question, and then I'm going to get to this. Don't worry about that. Just think about gathering this information, because you're not sure, it's not going to be clear at all where you're going to go in the next step until you get an answer to your question. And it might be what happens is the answer turns out to be a dead end for you. It doesn't take you anywhere. Now, if it's a question about somebody else's view, and usually it's one of two things. It's a question about someone else's view contrary to Christianity, or it's going to be a question about a challenge offered by somebody else. And this is really what Street Smarts focuses in on for the most part. You want clarity about these issues before you can move forward. You're setting the stage if you're going to answer a challenge or deflect a challenge to your own view. And so you're going to have to ask the questions that is going to set the stage. But people don't always cooperate. And when I say that, I don't mean they're not cooperative. What I'm saying is they don't always give you the answer that you're thinking they're going to give you that will lead to the next question you already have in your mind. This actually happened in the first interview I did with Street Smarts, and Sean McDowell wanted to jump right into a back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I said, all right, but it's not going to go like the book because you got your own unique stuff, you know. And so that's what happened. And he started firing this stuff off to me. And then I went following his lead, and he said, I didn't think you were going to ask me that question. So it was like, yeah, this is the nature of these kinds of conversations. So, and that's the way they often go. Sometimes you expect they're going to go one direction. You ask a question, and you're stonewalled. You don't know what to do next. Okay, well, I'll just say thank you. Let it ride. Learning experience of some sort. Generally, though, when people answer the question, there is going to be some other feature, factor, detail, ambiguity that you can trade on with another question to get more clarity and draw them out more and more. And the more you can do that, the more you're going to find out about their view. And not just will you find out more about their view, they will find out more about their view. And this seems a little odd to put it that way, but the fact is, and I had somebody just this last weekend tell me after I gave a presentation, been using your tactics material. He said, I've been amazed to find out people don't know how to defend their own views. When you ask them, how'd you come to that conclusion or something of that sort, they got nothing to say. They don't know how. And this is going to be the case a lot. And so what that person learns in that little conversation is that they don't have the goods they thought they had. And even if the Christian doesn't, in a certain sense, disarm them or parry them with some solid piece of information, just the fact that they are asked questions about their own view that they are incapable of answering can be a stone in their shoe. All right? Get them thinking. And there's a famous case of the waitress in Seattle a few years back, and it's in the Street Smarts book, where that happened. I was early in the morning. I didn't want to talk to anybody about, certainly not God or Jesus or anything, actually, because it was too early. I was trying to wake up. And she starts carrying on with all this stuff, my waitress, and I got to ask her these questions because I can't make sense out of what she's saying. I'm just trying to be polite. And it turns out, even though I'm not advocating for my view and I'm just asking for clarification, she tells me later, nobody's ever asked me any questions about my own view before, and it got me thinking, wow, I wasn't even trying. So the first step of the game plan is to gather information. Don't think of anything beyond that. If you're asking questions to get some information and you don't know where to go next, then don't go anywhere next. Chances are there are more questions you could ask based on the answer that's been given.
So more, what do you mean by that? And
Yes,
how did
of
you come to
course.
that conclusion
Yeah.
questions?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Sometimes you just have a sense when you're asking a question, you get a response, and your sense is this person doesn't want to talk about anything like this, and you let the conversation die a natural death. That's happened to me before. No, that's no problem. There's no pressure in this. So that's what my recommendation to Steve would be. If you don't know where to go, then you don't go anywhere else. You say thank you, but chances are there's going to be something in the response that you could ask more questions about.
And I think if it's somebody you're going to see again, you can certainly say, wow, I really want to think about this. Can we talk about this again later? And then you can think about it. And maybe you'll
Right.
come up with a question over the next week or whatever it is.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with just saying, oh, that's really interesting. Thanks.
If it is interesting.
Maybe you could even ask,
Maybe it's not interesting, and you say, okay, thanks. You don't have to commit yourself
you
to
could
it.
even say, I don't know how to respond to that. There's nothing wrong with being honest
That's
about
right.
this. In fact, the more you are, the more likely they're going to be willing to talk to you. Because if they feel like you will never acknowledge when they have a good point, they're not going to want to talk to you for very long. So don't be afraid to do that. I think that's totally fine to do.